The Louisville football program lost two more players to the transfer portal on Monday afternoon. We'll talk about what both of their departures means for the program next year and in the years to come, and much more on this episode of the Locked on the Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked on Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked on the Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode is brought to you by Sonos. Experience the game like never before with Sonos Arc, the premium smart soundbar for TVs, movies, music, gaming, and more. Visit Sonos.com to learn more. I also want to take this time to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked on Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, including YouTube, 5 days a week, your team every day. Defensive back Kani Walker and running back Aidan Robbins announced on Monday that they would be entering the transfer portal. And, the Louisville fan base is obviously not very happy about that. We'll talk about what both of their departures means for the Louisville football team next year, respectively. And then we'll transition into the basketball side of things for the second and third segments, explaining why Louisville's next matchup, which will come on Wednesday against the NC State Wolfpack, is a must-win game for the Cardinals. And if you remember, the very first ACC win of the year came against the Wolfpack on the road in Raleigh back in December. The final segment, we're going to, take some, use some takeaways from that game and apply it to what Louisville needs to do in that matchup to ensure that they sweep the Wolfpack in the regular season. Before we get into the content of today's show, like I mentioned, for those who are not aware of who I am, my name is Dalton Pence. I'm a credentialed media member for Cardinal Sports Zone, where I serve as both a football beat writer and a recruiting analyst. And I also do some PA announce work for the university. You can follow my Twitter handle in the graphic at the bottom left-hand of your screen. And the podcast Twitter page is at @LO_Louisville. So let's get right on into the show. It was announced on Monday, both players announcing respectively. Kani Walker first announced that he was going to be entering the transfer portal on Monday afternoon, followed by Aidan Robbins. The former was probably a little bit more unexpected. Kani Walker saw some time this year, only recorded one tackle that came against Kentucky in the season finale of the regular season. However, do not let that take away from what he projected to be in year 2 and year 3, and the fact that he also played some meaningful snaps down the line when Kei'Trel Clark went down due to injury. But for Louisville, this is a loss that makes things a little bit more interesting in the defensive backs room, because you're talking about a unit that has already lost Greedy Vance. And even with the loss of Vance, including Kani Walker in the Louisville cornerback room, you still probably needed to add maybe 1 to 2 more guys. Now, losing Kani, a player that was primed for a big year 2, defense coordinator Brian Brown said after the bowl game against Air Force, he said, look, we sat him out to preserve his red shirt, and his eligibility, because, we have him in our long-term plans. And, obviously this came as a surprise to not only the coaching staff, but obviously the fans and company. And it stings, 6'1" cornerback that has all the physical tools to be a lockdown cornerback in the ACC. We wish him the best of luck in his future endeavors and where he ends up. I know Kani personally, grateful for the times that we've been able to interact. Just a very, just an overall class act, and no doubt in my mind that he's going to succeed wherever he goes. And we wish him the best of luck. But like I mentioned, for the cornerback room, things just get a little bit more interesting. Some of that pressure was alleviated in a sense because Kei'Trel Clark did announce that he was coming back and kind of put the rumors to bed that he might be looking to leave and go to the transfer portal, but he is staying. You still have, you probably have a guy like Chandler Jones back. Trey Franklin, the JUCO transfer, is going to be back. Rance Connor, Derek Edwards, 2 true freshmen as well. But that's it right now. There was no additions in the Flyville 2022 class. As of right now, there's no defensive back, or there's no cornerback transfers. You do have a safety transfer in MJ Griffin from Temple. But overall right now, it is imperative that the coaching staff goes out and they go and get cornerback or two cornerbacks that can come in and produce right away. That does also raise questions not only for next year but the future in general. You would assume after next year that both Kei'Trel Clark and Chandler Jones will no longer be with the team as they pursue NFL opportunities. That leaves you in a nutshell with Trey Franklin, Rance Connor, and Derek Edwards. All three, Franklin has shown instances where he's been very solid throughout this past year. I'm interested to see how he plays. And then you have true freshmen Derek Edwards and Rance Connor, who have gotten some positive reviews from various members of the team and the coaching staff. But at the end of the day, they haven't really been tested, so there is a little bit of a risk there. Even though you have those three, if they prove out to be really good, you still need some depth. That's kind of where this comes at a very inopportune time for a position that really can't afford to lose any more guys. So Scott Satterfield and company will need to hit the defensive back room very heavily in the transfer portal. The other transfer that was announced after Kani Walker was running back Aidan Robbins, a hometown kid from Manual High School, graduated in 3 years, so he will be a graduate transfer wherever he decides to go. Unfortunately, this was kind of one of those things that you probably could see coming. Couldn't necessarily crack the too deep on the depth chart. Came in, I believe, looking at what he's done in the past handful of seasons. Last 2020, he had 5 carries for 10 yards, and then this past year he had two carries for 41 yards and a touchdown against Duke in that 62-22 victory. So really just not able to get much going this season. Didn't get a lot of opportunities. Obviously was behind a lot of guys: Jalen Mitchell, Travion Cooley, Hassan Hall, Maurice Berkeley, and even Jawar Jordan at the end of the year. So the writing was on the wall this year, even though there's kind of been some rumblings that maybe Travion Cooley may enter the transfer portal. You still, or at least that's kind of what the speculation has kind of been. I don't think there's anything concrete yet on if Cooley is in that headspace or not, but there's a ton of speculation from the fan base and that believes Cooley could be looking to go elsewhere. But even you have him that's going to be a guy that can get 20 to 25 carries. Tyon Evans from the Tennessee transfer, who Tennessee fans swear up and down he's an NFL talent. Then you have Jalen Mitchell, Jawar Jordan also. It's another season that you're probably looking at and you're thinking Aidan Robbins is probably going to be down the depth chart again. It makes you wonder whether or not they tried to look at him as a position switch type of player, but ultimately. We wish him the best of luck. Graduating college in 3 years is incredible, so hats off to him. Hopefully, he ends up in a place where he, is a feature back because, he is a very, 6'3", very strong back, runs, a solid 40 time as well. I was able to watch him a lot in high school, and, you see that talent there. And I think that it's one of those things that doesn't necessarily have a huge impact on the running back room because that's probably the most crowded position for the University of Louisville program. But overall, Kani Walker is a player that you couldn't really lose another guy at cornerback. And now that you've lost probably your, the youngest guy that, you think to be maybe a CB1 someday, he is going to be transferring now, or at least entering the transfer portal. You have to wonder how much Scott Satterfield and company are going to try to convince him to stay with the Cardinals. So we'll definitely continue to monitor that and announce where he's going after he puts that out there. So I want to transition now into the basketball side of things, where the Cardinals will look to bounce back from their first ACC loss against the Florida State Seminoles when they take on the NC State Wolfpack again for the second time in the early ACC slate. That will be at the KFC Yum Center. We'll talk about why this is a must-win game for the Cardinals. No exceptions on coming up here in just a second after we talk about our friends at GetUpside. Hey, Cardinal fans, once again, this is your host, Dalton Pence, with an incredible incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about, GetUpside. My listeners are making up to 25 cents for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free GetUpside app in the App Store or Google Play, right now and use the promo code SCORE and get a bonus 25 cents per gallon off on your first fill up. That's up to 50 cents cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Most of the people that drive a lot are making up to $200 to $300 a month in cash back, and there's no catch. You can cash out at any time to your bank account, PayPal, or any e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free GetUpside app and use the promo code SCORE to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. I want to take this time to say thank you again for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast, free on all streaming services, including YouTube, 5 days a week, your team every day. As I mentioned, the Cardinals back in action tomorrow evening when they host the NC State Wolfpack, 9 o'clock tip-off on the ACC Network at the KFC Yum Center. And I got to be honest, ever since NC State played the Cardinals back in December, I think it was December 4th to be exact, the Wolfpack have struggled to say the least. Regardless, this is a must-win game. As I have mentioned over and over and over, and even more than that, is the fact that there are not many opportunities with this down year of the ACC to accumulate good wins. It's more so avoiding bad losses. NC State, admittedly, they do have a lot of talent on the team. They're dealing with the the injury to Bates. That losing him, one of the best, if not the best, shot blocker in the conference, no longer able to play this year due to injury. NC State poses as a bad loss. They are 8-8 on the season, losers of their I think they lost 5 in a row. They've lost 6 out of their last 8. The only 2 victories come to Bethune-Cookman right after the Louisville game, and to Virginia Tech last Tuesday on the road at Virginia Tech. They are 1-4 in conference play. They lost to Miami, who's been playing very, very solid. Obviously, they lost to Louisville, lost to Florida State by 2, and lost to Clemson by 5. They also lost to Purdue in overtime, Richmond by 9, Wright State by 14. So this is a team that is not necessarily playing their best basketball. So it's kind of a mixture of 2 things. Number one, the loss against Florida State kind of takes away the leeway you have of suffering a loss in this matchup, because at the end of the day, you're trying your best. You lose your leash gets a little shorter. I'm trying to say that in a couple of different ways, but I think your leash gets a little shorter. You can't keep losing games to teams that aren't going to make the tournament or project to not be in the tournament field. And as of right now, I don't know where Florida State stands. I think the only team that Louisville's lost to that's projected in the tournament at this point is Michigan State. Now, if Western Kentucky wins the Conference USA, that's a different story. But right now, they pretty much have to win the conference to get in. Ultimately, but it's got to be one of those games to where Louisville has to handle business. If it's an ugly win, it's an ugly win. You hope, having played them the first time, that it'll be a little bit easier. You beat them on the road. Now you're at home. For the most part, you led in that game by 15 points. It was more so just a matter of, stalling out on offense, turning the ball over, etc. Bad shooting in the second half, but you got the victory on the road in Raleigh. But ultimately, I can't sugarcoat it. Like, I'm not going to be one of those people to say, a loss is okay if you show some positives in the process. Like, we are at the point in the season now for Louisville, it maybe if they don't have, 3, maybe 4 bad losses, hopefully Florida State is able to, go on a little bit of a running, a little bit of a streak, where they win some games and get squarely in the tournament field. But right now, Louisville is past the point where they can afford to lose a game like this, because you look at the rest of the schedule down the road for the Cardinals in this month. There's opportunities to where it's going to take a lot for Louisville to win those games. The very end of the month, it's North Carolina and it's Duke. You also have Notre Dame in the mix, who beat Kentucky, Virginia down in Charlottesville. The Cardinals have not won in Charlottesville since they've joined the ACC, and maybe the last time they've done so is the 80s. But overall, as we mentioned, I mean, you have to take care of business, each and every game as best as you can, because we saw last year, and I don't want to keep bringing it up, but we have to bring it up because that's just the state of the schedule that Louisville's in right now, and that's the fact that, you just have to take care of business. We saw that 1 to 2 games, some bad performances can keep you out of the tournament and be the number one first team out, to where your team is 69, right outside of the tournament. Year 4 of Chris Mack, there is a ton of pressure, especially with the roster that was overhauled in the offseason. We will see just kind of how things are able to pan out in that regard. Ultimately, I think when you look at it and how well Louisville played at times against NC State, you can't necessarily sleep on the Wolfpack because, as I mentioned, yes, they lost 6 of the past 8 games, but a lot of them have been close losses outside of the head scratchers to Richmond and Wright State. Purdue, they took them to overtime. Miami was less than 10 points. Florida State was a 2-point loss. Clemson was a 5-point loss. They beat Virginia Tech. Darion Sebron is one of the best scorers in the ACC. It's going to be a tough matchup. It feels like there's probably no gimme games in the ACC, although I think that there's going to be probably some, down the road where they will get a couple, wins with comfortable deficits. But ultimately at this time, we can't understate it. I'm not going to say that if they lose, they're out of the tournament. Like, I don't think it's at that point. But you kind of almost have to treat it like that because you're riding a fine line, so to speak, because you keep accumulating these losses. You're going to get to the end of the season, and those bad losses really start to build up. And NC State right now at 8-8 would definitely be considered a bad loss, and they're trending in the wrong direction. So hopefully Louisville is able to bounce back from the loss against Florida State and able to put together a good, a solid performance to get back into the win column to move to 5-1 in conference play. I want to take the final segment to kind of dive back into the first matchup, revisit what went right for the Cardinals, kind of draw some takeaways with what they could apply to the second matchup to make sure that this game goes like the first one in the sense of getting a victory. We'll talk about that here in just a second after we talk about our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs, which pretty much begins this upcoming weekend. But BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the bets, sports, wagering action for 2022 new year, and that means a new updated desktop and mobile website. To sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit by using the promo code LOCKEDON. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. It is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports, and BetOnline is where the game starts. Final segment of the afternoon, whatever time you're listening to. Final segment of the episode, I should say, is diving a little bit back into that first matchup on December 4th that Louisville saw their first ACC win of the season, and kind of drawing some takeaways and what we could apply to this upcoming matchup. Number one, and I think that this is the key here, the Cardinals out-rebounded NC State 46-30 in this matchup. They turned the ball over 7 more times, doubled them up in turnovers. Louisville did, and the offensive rebounds they doubled, and defensive rebounds was a +9 margin. The Cardinals shot the ball almost 40% from deep. Compare that to NC State, 28.6%. Both teams shot about 40% from the field. Malik Williams led the team in scoring. Dre Davis and Noah Locke also in double figures with L. Ellis and Matt Cross. You look at what NC State was able to do. Darion Sebron struggled from the field, 4 of 14, 11 points. Smith had 17, Helms with 18, Hayes with 15, and there were no points from the NC State Wolfpack bench. So, that's one thing that when you look at What the Cardinals need to do to try to, make sure that this is a win. Number one is they have to continue to hit the boards the best that they can, and get an instance to where it's a lopsided, affair on the glass. Because I feel like when Louisville is limiting teams to one shot per possession, and not allowing a lot of offensive rebounds, and even on the other end, when Louisville gets more shots in a possession, obviously when you win the rebounding battle, it's a big it's a big statistic. But to do so by plus 16, it's a matchup to where I think there's no doubt in my mind that that definitely was a huge factor in Louisville coming out on top and escaping Raleigh with a victory. Number one, and that's kind of number one. Number two, it's kind of a dual part thing, because you could say perimeter shooting and turnovers, because you shot the ball about 40% from three. Now, granted, NC State didn't shoot the ball. Excuse me, I don't know where you're going. Sorry about that. Granted, NC State didn't shoot the ball nearly as well, under 30%. I feel like Louisville has to, continue to, utilize what NC State is giving them. I feel like there was some, very good shots that Louisville was able to get to by good ball facilitation. From the lead guards, and I liked what I saw from L. Ellis. Matt Cross played really well. Obviously, he hit one of the toughest shots that I can remember in my time of being a Louisville fan in my 23 years on this earth. But ultimately, limiting the turnovers and creating more turnovers, because Louisville, this was in a time period where we were kind of like, okay, we need to take care of the ball more. 13 turnovers, which obviously isn't nowhere near the season high, but it was still, double what NC State has. I think, taking care of the ball, crashing the boards and being more effective on, on the glass, is probably the two keys to this one. Obviously, Darion Sebron is going to be a player that likely doesn't shoot 4 for 14 from the field. In this one, had 11 points and 7 rebounds. He's averaging 20.1 points per game, 9.8 rebounds per game, 53.6% from the field, and just 24.1% from three-point line. So, he is a mismatch problem. He's been one of those guys that a lot of teams have not had any luck to stop. Thankfully, he was off against Louisville in the first matchup, and you can't necessarily bank on that one in this one. You have to continue to handle business. I'm interested to see how Chris Mack is able to devise a game plan for him. I think Trey Davis and Sam Williamson would probably be the two that are kind of intertwined and kind of switched on to him, due to their length and their defensive tenacity. Matt Cross is a player that I love his effort in a game like this, just because NC State does very well offensively, but defensively is kind of where they have been struggling over the past however many games or so since they played the Louisville. So for the previous matchup and all you can take away of that, you can't necessarily bank on their best player, not shooting the ball well, but also NC State 0 points from their bench in that matchup. So it's kind of hard to predict what's going to happen in that regard. But to ensure that you come in with the victory, it's about winning the rebounding battle, limiting the turnovers, not getting double-digit turnovers, but also taking good three-point shots. There were a couple instances in the second half where the Cardinals just struggled to score the ball. A lot of that was due to turnovers and bad shot selection. So it's continuing in the long, season battle of trying to get the best shots. Granted, the team looked good offensively against Florida State at a lot of times, but it's just a matter of ultimately making shots. I think that this is going to be a Louisville win, and I'll tell you tomorrow, about the players to watch, and we'll it might be an episode with Jeremy Wallman. We will see. Obviously, his father is still going through some health issues. We won't divulge into the specifics, but definitely keep the Wallman family in your thoughts and prayers if you so may, and definitely appreciate it. Before we get out of here, a couple quick shots. First to the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast. The most recent episode dropped last Friday. It was a virtual episode with a lot of us in remote locations. We talked about the recaps from Pittsburgh and Georgia Tech from the week before, and kind of tied those together and analyzed those as a group, and then previewed the Florida State Seminoles and all that good stuff. You can find that at cardinalsportszone.com. Also want to give a quick shout out to the Locked On Bets podcast hosted by your boy Q with handicapping expert analysis from Lee Sterling. You can get that on the Odyssey app or wherever you like to get your podcast. Tomorrow, it will depend on if it is a Womman Wednesday. If it is not, we will dive a little bit further into the matchup with NC State and kind of preview them again and see how that team's changed a little bit. If Jeremy Wallman is on the show, we will approach things in a different manner and kind of do more of an overall general type of look into maybe not just basketball but football and stuff like that as well. So that's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.